Hello everyone and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and the Commander's Forge is an area for me to talk about magic and Commander in ways that I enjoy it. Now, today I'm going to talk about something that, as Commander players, we all inherently do, and that is building with a restriction. But before I get into that, I would like to throw out a congratulations to Jim LePage of the Spike Feeders, Rachel Weeks of the Commander Sphere podcast, Daquan Watson of the Color of Magic podcast and Power Dragon on YouTube, and Gregory Sablan, who was the one that I personally had to look up. He's a member of the Army and does magic card alters. But I would like to congratulate them all on being chosen for the Commander Advisory Group, and I do hope to get to know more about each of them as they serve in that capacity. But now let's talk more about this restrictions and building with restrictions. Again, playing Commander, we already build with a restriction. We have to have a 100 card deck, including our Commander, and we have to adhere to our Commander's color identity. But do you ever find yourself building a deck and you notice the way you built it, you didn't intend to do things the way you did, but it just kind of fit together in a way that put a restriction on it? Like, say, building a deck and you're like, I just don't want to use fetch lands. That's a restriction. Or there's, some people might be running a companion, and that adds another level of restrictions. So, I'm just going to take you through a quick walk down of the restrictions on my Niv Mizzet Reborn deck. Then I'll give you a quick breakdown after the ad of the deck itself. And, of course, the deck list will be available in the description below. Now, Niv Mizzet Reborn costs white, blue, black, red, green. It is a 6/6 dragon avatar. It has flying, but more importantly, when Niv Mizzet Reborn enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library for each color pair. Choose a card that is exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I took that and I ran with it. So, first off, that no fetch lands thing, that was a restriction I put on this deck. I cannot run fetch lands. Another restriction I added on top of that is every creature in the deck is a legendary creature. And then I added another one on top of that by running a companion. Jegantha the Wellspring costs 4 and a hybrid red-green. It's an elemental elk and it's a 5/5. But its companion cause is no card in your starting deck can have more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. And then it taps to add white, blue, black, red, green, and it can't be spent to pay generic mana costs. The idea to run that was, it's a mana dork that if we hit a piece of ramp on turn 2, we can put into our hand on turn 3, cast on turn 4, and then use it to cast Niv Mizzet even if we don't have the perfect WUBRG mana. So that brought in another level of restrictions. And the only things that can really get around that are the artifacts that I'm running. And I kept those fairly on theme as well. Other than the 2 I'm running to reset Niv Mizzet so I can constantly trigger him, like Crystal Shard, which is a 3 mana artifact that you can either pay 3 and tap it or pay a blue and tap it to return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. So if I have a blue up, I just return Niv and then recast him. And Conjurer's Closet, which is a 5-mana artifact that says at the beginning of your end step, you exile a creature from your battlefield and you return it to the battlefield. Now, in addition to that, we are running 11 mana rocks. The first one being Chromatic Lantern, even though some people say it's bad. But it's a 3-mana artifact that says lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it taps for any color of mana. The other 10 are the signets, the guild signets. Simic, Rakdos, Orzhov, Dimir, Golgari, Gruul, Boros, Azorius, Selesnya, and Izzet. They all cost 2, and they all say 1 tap and add the 2 colors that is correspondent to their guild. My little nod to the Ravnica guilds. But then if you look at the creatures that I'm running, the spells that I'm running, it's all broken down by guild. And I can tell you exactly how many of each guild is represented in the 98. We have 3 Azorius cards. We have 7 Orzhov cards. We have 4 Dimir, 2 Izzet, 7 Rakdos, 6 Golgari, 6 Gruul, 5 Boros, 2 Selesnya, and 6 Simic. This also makes it easy to break down my color distribution throughout the deck, because we know the mana cost will never have more than 1 of their colored pips. And they have at least 1 of their colored pips. So with the quick math I did, between the 98, the Commander, and the Companion, we have 18 white pips, 16 blue pips, 25 black pips, 22 red pips, and 22 green pips. And that gets worked into the mana base as well. When I looked at it, I had a fairly even split on what colors could be produced. And that breakdown is, we have 27 white producing mana sources. We have 17 blue producing mana sources. We have 24 black producing mana sources, 25 red producing mana sources, and 25 green producing mana sources. And again, I'm not running any fetch lands, but I do have some shocks in there. And I do have some basics. And then besides that, I have a bunch of the lands that check to see if you have a type of land to come in untapped. And I'm also running all of the modal dual-faced flip lands from Zendikar Rising at the moment. And I believe I have a selection of the lands, the Battle Bond lands that come in untapped if you have 2 or more opponents. And it's still a really expensive mana base. It just adds up. But that said, another restriction that I self-implied here was that every creature in the deck had to be legendary. And looking through the deck, 36 cards are legendary, including the Commander and the Companion, and there's 28 non-legendary cards. And most of those are the artifacts. It's an interesting building restriction, but the deck is actually a lot of fun to play, and it does stupid stuff. And I like doing stupid stuff. Now, if you looked at the contents of the deck, there's it might seem a little segmented, like It doesn't know exactly what it wants to do, but I can break it down into a core set of 6 cards and a 7th that goes with one of them. But those 6 cards start with Arvad the Cursed, which is 3, a white and a black. He's a 3/3 vampire knight with Death Touch and Lifelink, but other legendary creatures you control get +2/+2. Now, originally I was going to build a deck with him as the commander and do a Legendary Matters theme, but the Orzhov legendaries didn't really do it for me, if that makes any sense. Next, we have Rona, Disciple of Gix, which is 1, a blue and a black for a human artificer. She's a 2/2. And when Rona, Disciple of Gix enters the battlefield, you may exile a historic card from your graveyard, and historic cards are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. But you can cast non-land cards exiled with Rona, and you can pay 4 and tap it to exile the top card of your library. She's just kind of protection for, like, oh, you got rid of a key creature. She doesn't cost a lot. You can play her and then probably play whatever it is you exile out of your graveyard. But speaking of the graveyard, we're also running Niambi, Esteemed Speaker, which is a white and a blue for a human cleric, and she is a 2/1. She has Flash. When she enters the battlefield, you can return another target creature you control to your hand. And if you do, you gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost. So this is another way to reset Niv Mizzet. But more importantly, it says 1, white, blue, and tap. Discard a legendary card to draw 2 cards. Now, more in the vein of Legendary Matters, we also have Wrath Capuchin, Ship's Mage, for 2, a white and a blue. He's a 3/3 human wizard with Flash, Flying, and you may cast historic spells as though they had Flash. And again, that's artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. And then the creature that really ties the legendary theme together in the deck is Captain Sisay, which is 2, a white and a green, for a 2/2 human soldier that says tap and search your library for a legendary card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. But she can get more than just creatures, and the next core card that I kind of built this deck around was Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. Yes, it's expensive at 5, a white and a black, and you do have to have a legendary creature or a planeswalker to cast it, but again, that's what the whole deck is built around. But it returns all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that gets... it's just kind of the best protection in the deck. And the last of the core cards is Bring to Light, which is a sorcery for 3, a green and a blue, and it has Converge. You search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with a converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast Bring to Light. You exile that card, then shuffle your library. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So this can hit almost every non-artifact, non-land in the deck. Again, Primeval's Glorious Rebirth is too expensive to hit with it. Ruach Thar would be too expensive to hit with it. But there's a lot of valid targets we can hit with that. And the last card that I mentioned being tied to one of the cards that I talked about is Etrata the Silencer, which is 2 blue-black for a 3/5 vampire assassin. Etrata cannot be blocked, and whenever she deals combat damage to a player, you exile target creature that player controls, put a hit counter on that card. The player loses the game if they own 3 or more exiled cards with hit counters on them. Etrata's owner shuffles Etrata into their library. With Captain Sisay, we can, every turn, bring her back, and if you have Wrath, you bring her back, flash her in, untap, attack, shuffle her in, and then just repeat that 3 times. I think that's enough talking about the restrictions in the deck. I'm going to kick it over to a quick ad, and then we'll get into the proper deck tech. Hi. If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me tell you some of the reasons why I started using it. For one, it's free. There's no subscription fee. You don't have to pay for anything. Second, it gives you all of the editing software you need for everything you're going to do. Beyond that, it helps distribute your podcast to so many different places, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's amazing. Not only that, but they offer to sponsor you. Right there. That's it. Just by recording podcasts, they will pay you based on the number of listens it gets. It brings everything you need into one place. And if you want to try it out, you can download their app, or you can go to anchor.fm to get started. Now back to the episode. Alright, and welcome back. Now, we've already talked about certain parts of the deck, including the main core of the deck. But let's talk about the fact that our commander and our companion, Niv-Mizzet Reborn, is a 6/6 flyer, and Jegantha the Wellspring is a 5/5. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I like to turn creatures sideways. So we're running things that are going to help facilitate that. And we're going to start with Zagras, Thief of Heartbeats. He is a 4/4 vampire rogue for a black and a red. He costs 1 less for each creature in your party, which means if you have a warrior, a rogue, a cleric, or a wizard, if you have all 4, you can reduce it by 4, and he just costs a black and a red. And typically I cast him for 1 or 2 less. Either way, he has flying, he has death touch, and he has haste. He also gives other creatures you control death touch. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. That's less relevant. But giving all of our creatures death touch means it's going to lower the incentive of people wanting to block our creatures. We're running Judith the Scourge Diva, which is a 2/2 human shaman for 1, a black and a red. And she gives other creatures we control +1/+0, and whenever a non-token creature I control dies, she deals 1 damage to any target. We've got Rhythm of the Wilds, which is an enchantment for 1, a red and a green, that says creature spells I control can't be countered, but also our non-token creatures have Riot. So they either enter with a +1/+1 counter or haste. We have Fires of Yavimaya, which is an enchantment for 1, a black, or 1, a red and a green, that says creatures you control have haste, and you can sacrifice it to give a creature +2/+2 till end of turn. Gruul Warchant, which is an enchantment for 2, a red and a green, that says attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 and have menace. That means they can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. Then we have Mirari's Wake, which is an enchantment for 3, a green and a white, that has an anthem on the front end that says creatures you control get +1/+1, but it also works as a mana doubler, saying whenever we tap a land for mana, we add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. So as long as we have this and the Lantern, all of our lands tap for 2 mana of any color. Next up we have Ethereal Absolution, which is an enchantment for 4, a white and a black. Creatures we control get +1/+1. Creatures my opponent control get -1/-1. And for 2, a white and a black, we can exile a card from an opponent's graveyard, and if it was a creature card, we create a 1/1 white and black spirit token with flying. And that brings us to Hadana's Climb, which is 1, a green and a blue, for a legendary enchantment. And at the beginning of combat on our turn, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control. That if that creature has 3 more counters on it, we transform Hadana's Climb, and it becomes the Winged Temple of Araska, which can either tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, or we can pay 1, a blue, and a green, and tap it, and target creature we control gets flying, and a +X/+X till end of turn, where X is its power. That's all the stuff that can make Niv Mizzet a 3-shot commander, basically. But the deck itself is actually just filled with, let's just say, aggressively minded creatures, like Rubik Thar the Unbowed. For 4, a red and a green, he is a 6/6 Ogre Warrior with Vigilance and Reach. He attacks each combat of Fable, and whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Rubik Thar deals 6 damage to that player. Yes, that does count ourselves. We usually don't care. Like, at all. Next up we have Grand Warlord Radha. She has 2, a red and a green. She is an elf warrior, and she's a 3/4 with haste. But whenever 1 or more creatures we control attacks, we add that much mana in any combination of red and or green until at a turn, and we don't lose this mana as Steps in Fate's end. The nice thing about this mana over Jegantha's mana is we can use this mana to pay for generic mana costs. Next, we have Tajic, Blade of the Legion, for 2, a red and a white. He is a 2/2 human soldier. He is indestructible, and he has Battalion, and that says whenever he attacks with at least 2 other creatures, he gets +5/+5 till end of turn. After him, we have Aurelia, the Exemplar of Justice, which is 2, a red and a white, for an angel. She is a 2/5 with flying and mentor. That's whenever she attacks, we put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with less power. And then at the beginning of combat on our turn, we can choose up to 1 creature we control until at a turn that creature gets +2/+0, trample if it's red, and vigilance if it's white. So if we hit Niv Mizzet with that, it goes from being a 6/6 flyer to a 8/6 flyer with trample and vigilance. And then our last creature, we put that in quotations, that helps us with combat is Iroas, God of Victory. He is a 7/4 for 2, a red and a white. He's indestructible. As long as our devotion to red and white is less than 7, he isn't a creature. But creatures we control have menace, and we prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures we control. Now, that's all well and good, and we do have a lot of, call them small, aggressive creatures, things like Shovel, Bane of Monsters, which is a green and a black for a 1/3 with Death Touch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponents have no permanents with bounty counters on them, we put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. And then whenever a permanent opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, we gain 3 life and draw a card. We have Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons. She is, again, a black and a green. She's a human cleric, and she's a 2/2. But whenever she deals combat damage to a player, we put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and whenever one or more of those counters are put on a creature, we make a 1/1 green snake with Death Touch. And then to kind of round out our aggressive creatures, we have Daxos of Meletus. He's 1, a white, and a blue for a human soldier. He's a 2/2. He can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. And whenever he deals combat damage to a player, we exile the top card of that player's library. We gain life equal to that card's converted mana cost. Until end of turn, we may cast that card, and we may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. Now you might be thinking, man, that's a lot of creatures. Like, with his restrictions, like, what can he reasonably run for ramp and removal and all that jazz? Well, my ramp is all in my artifacts. But as far as removal goes, there's not really that much holding us back. Like, we're running Mortify, which is an instant for 1, a white and a black that says destroy target creature or enchantment. Or we have Putrefy, which is 1, a black and a green that says destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. Or Terminate, which is a black and a red. It's an instant that destroys a creature and it can't be regenerated. Or Dire Tactics, which is a white and a black. And it's an instant that exiles target creature. And if you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. And there's a non-zero amount of humans running around in this deck, so it's usually not a problem. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. If you want to see the full deck lists, it will be in the description. With that, closing remarks. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button. If you want notifications, hit that bell. And I'll see you next time. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I would like to thank Nate and Erica Jacobs for designing my logo, and Cody Mulphy and Ian Foss for allowing me to use a sample of music from their band The Crypt. The podcast can be found on YouTube by searching Commander's Forge. The podcast is Commander's Forge, that is CMDR_Forge on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at BentzMr, that is BENTZMR. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, here's to fun games and sick plays.